the 8th day of March. It's 3 days to the anniversary. The anniversary of the 12th anniversary is on Saturday. I believe I said Sunday earlier in the week for some reason. I got a million excuses. Which one do you want to hear? You got a great show. These are great shows when we do Reactor 3 and 4 because they're the root of all evil, right? That was the cover story is all about Reactor 3. It's all about Reactor 4. It all falls apart. The House of Cards crumbles when you look at the documentation. So how many people believe that the people on the right, the mainstream media on the right, are actually 100 foot above the carnage to the left? Nobody, right? Except for nobody. Nobody in their right mind, anyway. And so they can write it and pretend they're there, but they know they're not there. We know they're not there. That's the cover story. But why would the world's media participate in such a cover-up over a lousy couple of buildings? If you want to know more about that, don't ask Google, ask Dana. Durnford, the nuclear proctologist.org, also known as the Gamma Goat. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. Let's get after it. We got lots to get through. Reactor 3 and 4 never a simple show. And you can never learn this, unfortunately, anywhere else what I'm going to show you tonight. That's the most terrifying part of the story. To me, anyway, right? Because I had felt back in the original days that, you know, I'll do an educational program. I'll go public. It'll give me more street cred, so to speak, which I knew was quite the risk because the nuclear industry doesn't take kind any opposition, any dissenting voices. And so when I decided to go public, I knew that it was going to be a hail for the rest of my life of attacks from the lobbying groups and the public relation firms. And that's, thank goodness, I got such a thick skin, it doesn't mean nothing to me. You know, it's lawyers screaming at somebody who's saying, hey, look at this piece of shit, right? And they're like, no, don't look at me. I'm a public relation firm. I'm hideous. I'm going to start it off. We got a lot of pictures, headlines. There's no way to get through it all, obviously, right, in a sitting, but we'll try really hard. And these are by far my favorite shows. This is the 12th anniversary, 3 days away. And the cover story is, I'll play it for you. They're pretending they're in a building, the Reactor 4 fuel pool, which would be at the top of the building, to your left. And there's only a stump of the building left. Let's hear it from the...
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside the...
Dramatic little demons, eh? And so, for those who are not familiar with the layout of these buildings, this is Reactor 3. It's the same as Reactor 4. Obviously, that's gone too. At the top of the buildings, you can see two depictions of rectangle blocks. These are what's known as the fuel pools. These buildings were 190 feet tall. And this is the reactor core. All of it is underwater. So when you transfer the reactor core to the pool, it's done underwater. And so there's the angle you're looking at on that cutout doesn't really do it justice because the reactor core itself is actually underwater. And the fuel pools are what they consider the top of the buildings. So they're pretending they're in the top of that building that actually doesn't even exist. And what makes that crazy is it's right alongside of that building, Reactor 3, which was the mixed oxide. So each fuel pool would have up to 4 decades of reactor cores. So 4 decades in each pool of these, because you don't have a repository to store it anywhere on the planet, right? They're still storing, in the 50s they had done aircraft, they were trying nuclear airplanes. Well, the fuel rods from the reactors they were using are still in fuel pools in Idaho National Laboratory, which is 73 years later. Secrecy agreement between Fukushima and International Atomic Energy Agency revealed by Tokyo newspaper. Now, the poll we got tonight, did the International Atomic Energy Agency... Where am I to here? I got that backwards, did I? Did the International Atomic Energy Agency, the nuclear industry in Japan, fake the Fukushima Reactor 3 and 4 fuel pools? And the evidence I'm going to lay out for everybody tonight is very overwhelming that our media doesn't exist anymore, and our universities. And that's pretty disappointing, but you need to know the facts, unfortunately, and the facts are not going to be pretty. So the International Atomic Energy Agency is not a watchdog. It's a lobbying group for the nuclear industry. If you go look them up, that's what it'll tell you, too. They won't use the word lobbying, but they're the biggest nuclear lobbying group on the planet, right? There's United Nations, which is who IAEA is. So is ERPA and Honest Clear and UNICEF, and just absurd amount of these subsidy companies. They're what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, and George Bush Sr. described as the New World Order. Let me play a little clip of George Bush Sr., who thank good is rotten in the ground as we speak. Now, this is George Bush Sr. talking about United Nations, and he refers to him over and over and over as the New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Now, you know UN, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the actual devil. Here's the current devil generation. Here's the last generation at the International Atomic Energy Agencies. You don't waste time making these depictions because you're bored. You do it for a reason, right? And you'll understand as we get through this. So your atoms for humanity. The A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs, depleted uranium, dulram, low-level radioactive material, but is very harmful. They shoot 1.5 tons a minute. It was like 700 tons were used in the Gulf War from just the A-10 Warthogs. That's equivalent to a Japanese physicist estimated it was equal to about 44,000 Nagasaki-size dirty bombs going off, low level, compared to fuel rods themselves. There is no low levels. The A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs, and they catch fires. They're going through the air, and they're full of everything, technetium-99, strontium, uranium, plutonium. They had gone through a chain reaction. Okay, we're getting there. Now we're starting to get into the deep water. The IAEA hid the effects of Chernobyl. So Chernobyl, for those who are not familiar, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and United Kingdom. 9,400 farms. So they should have abandoned Ireland and Scotland and United Kingdom. So the IAEA, in other words, has a long history of cover-ups. Everything, including the Fukushima fuel pools. So this was TEPCO headline. This is important for the rest of the show. All spent fuel removed from reactor 4 fuel pools in Fukushima number 1, TEPCO says. There, you can see the picture. See how high they are above the actual water? Now that boils off 120,000 liters a day into the community. But they said there was 1,535 fuel rod assemblies. Each assembly is around 1,800 pounds. The rods are 12 feet long, 18 pounds. There's 100 of them in each assembly. So there they were saying they got the fuel out of the reactor. You got Arnie Gunnison saying it's like a crushed pack of cigarettes while advocating in mainstream media the picture that I put behind him, and refuses to acknowledge that it looks like that. So that rules him out. Of course, all kinds of media. Now, don't think of it as the so-called journalists. Think of it as the corporation had to get behind this for this to happen. And that there was no media that says, hey, wait, that's not true. It looks like the picture to the left. Except for me. So the building to your left is the very stump of the building to your left in this. Okay. Now remember, alongside of this reactor 3, there's only a stump of that left. So the fuel pools, the reactor cores are all lost, and we have reactor 2 up in the top left-hand corner was the only building that remained intact. But look at the temperature. It burnt constantly for several days. It had multiple explosions that we'll get to some of these. So here's the cover and the cover story. The cover to your right, that's over the stump of reactor 4, is exactly that. You can see the guts of the building. So allegedly, inside of the cover, it looks like the picture to your left. Of course, you can't do it. It's a nuclear meltdown. So when you look at 3 and 4 alongside of each other, they got nothing to do with the picture to the left, right? There is no top. You can build a top there, which was built off site and laid there with cranes, but you can't have the fuel pool that got... The explosion of reactor 3 was 25 miles away. So when you look at the reactor 3 to your left, it's supposed to be 190 feet tall. The fuel pools were at the very top of it, right? And on top of it, I mean the top 2 pools and the reactor cores in the middle. They're all underwater. And you can't have everything underwater when there's only stumps left. That's just the way it is. It doesn't work any other way. UN agency, United Nations. So this could be ERPA, Zornsclear, or the IAEA, because you have many subsidy nuclear corporations meant to create a controlled debate. So they have debates with each other. The World Health Organization debates with this one, and they're all the same organization. Like, it's so clear what's going on. I don't understand why the world is just sitting in silence. Why is everybody taking marching orders from a despicable, disgusting, parasitic corporation like UN? Reactor 3 exploded a second time 24 hours later. The wind and the rain brought high levels of radiation over Tokyo, Sendai, Nagano, well, actually, it covered the whole planet in 19.5 days. And so, yes, you know, you can imagine how bad ground zero is going to be. The explosion's felt 25 miles away. There was another explosion. Only thing left is the stump of the building. There is no pool. This is why we got a poll tonight. Did the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, which is no sovereignty, no power over any country, but yet exerts it constantly. The nuclear industry in Japan's fake Fukushima, did they fake Fukushima Reactor 3 and 4? Now tonight we're only talking about the fuel pools. We're not talking about the reactors, which were right up where the fuel pools are. Say that for another show. It was a nuclear explosion at the Fukushima Reactor 3. Plutonium scattered. I know we done the math on the plutonium, right? 2% was plutonium, I think. And I can't remember the poundage. Was it 12,000 pounds of plutonium lost, or was it 21,000? I think it was 21,000 pounds. We'll go with 12. So let's say 12,000 pounds of plutonium was released into the environment. Plutonium was named after the devil, and its half-life, there's 10 half-lives, by the way. Its half-life for the decay of 239, which is the most popular one and the worst one, it's 24,000 years. So it takes 240,000 years. That's more than enough time to kill all the species on its own, right? All the bacteria, all the fungus included. Which was pretty well done for the Northern Hemisphere already. That's why you see the forest fires the way they are, because the forests are not sucking up water anymore because you killed the fungus, and that's why, and the foliage in the trees are not breaking down. So when you have forest fires, then they're massive right away, and they throw, because the litter didn't break down. When it burns, it's a new phenomenon. It's like these floating masses of fire rises up that didn't exist before, because it would always break down by natural, right? As soon as, like, there's a regular fall in the forest of foliage and leaves and everything else in litter. And so there's a whole community that exists for millions of years that breaks it down as soon as it's available on the ground, for instance. And so the trees are still breaking down, but even worse because of the Wigner effect. And the roots are sucking up radiation. The spiders can't tie on to them no more. And so that don't break down. So it's a different type of forest fire, because it all burns. And there's big masses instead of being half rotten or half composted by the ecosystem, right? Rotten. What are you going to do? Here's what's rotten. So the fuel pool and reactor cores were at the top of the building. There's no top to the building. And pretending there's a top to the building don't mean there's a top to the building. Plutonium, uranium, and curium is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Yay. And number 3 have been blown out. Let me try that again for you. The plutonium and uranium in reactor 3 was blown out. Huh. I can't see it personally, but I'll take your word for it. You got any better pictures you can show me? How about this one? That's not the one. How about this one? That looks like a fuel pool 100 feet above the wreckage. They painted it invisible, Dana. It's right there. Can't you see it? Plutonium, uranium in reactor 3 have been blown out. This was no ordinary explosion. Well, they felt it 25 miles away. And this is the stump of reactor 4. And this is the cover story. It's all about these buildings. There's 4 of them. But we suspect, and with the documentation I provided last night, that reactor 6 and the common spent fuel pool and the dry cask lost their inventories. And so now we're talking about a much bigger... I gotta play with the light, hang on. The light is not very happy with me. I had it too bright. We'll let it sleep for another 5 minutes here. Just bugs me when something don't work the way it's supposed to. So the poll tonight is, did the International Atomic Energy Agency, the nuclear industry worldwide, and Japan fake Fukushima's reactors 3 and 4 fuel pools? We're only talking about the fuel pools. It's hard not to talk about the reactors because they're at the top of the building, right? And reactor 4 was doing fuel change and some maintenance, but they don't take all the fuel out of the reactor core. On a crazy day, they would take out half. That would be madness. And so they do this every 18 months where they change out, well, I guess they might change more than that. But I like going with half because it downplays everything, right? Okay, so they felt the explosion 25 miles away.
Radioactive contaminants now moving, which indicate that the damaged cores of these reactors, the meltdowns themselves, are now contributing to the contamination of the Pacific Ocean and groundwater. That's
contributing. It's blown completely. Like the building there is 190 feet. You can barely see it. This is a pretty old, 9 years old, right? But you can see the explosion. The top of the reactor 2 is right here, or 1. I can't. Well, this would be 2 because, or this. Anyway, that's 600 feet high. The building's 190 feet high. The reactor core is actually falling. It's actually falling out of the sky, and they got footage. As you can see, the reactor building falling, the reactor core, because it doesn't exist anymore. See. Explosion at Unit 3 drove the nuclear fuel out of the storage pool. Gee, I wonder what he means by that. What the hell is that? Oh, that's what's left of Reactor 3. It look kind of weird on that angle, right? Because you normally only give you this one angle all the time. But you got to realize what it looked like originally. So you see all this green stuff. No irony in this one. That's a reagent they sprayed, so the fuel pellets are not, they're going to be pulsing, still splitting the atom, right? This perpetual machine. And that's meant to catch it before it rises up and kills the homeless. Curium and plutonium is outside of Fukushima plant indicate a nuclear explosion of reactor number 3. Broken spent fuel rods may have been scattered. Gee, I don't know. I can't tell the difference. Reactor 3, I wonder could the fuel rods that are no longer at the top of the building were scattered? That could be. It's hard to say. Ejection of nuclear fuel. That pretty well says the story there, I think. Blast of Fukushima. Now, this is the cover story. They covered this up. Everything I'm showing you is not accepted by universities or media. Mom, they're in basements all over the world. Mom, come down. Dana's lying. This is Francis' model of the radioactive fallout. It's not a joke. I got to make light of it sometimes to stop from screaming, right? So after 16 days, the planet is covered in radiation. Don't that give you a good glow all over your body? Because it probably did. You just can't see it. Unit 1 and Unit 3 detonated. You won't see that picture anywhere. March the 12th to March the 14th. Due diligence. Military units severely contaminated when Reactor 3 exploded. Well, I don't think explosion is quite the proper word for Reactor 3. I'll accept it, because that's definitely an explosion for sure, but it's a little bit worse, actually. They couldn't even stand up by each other because of how hot, radioactive. They would be dead by now, no doubt. Within a week, they would have died. Entire nuclear core injected into the environment. What does that mean, I wonder? What are you showing us that picture for? What are you showing us that sentence, Dana? I don't know. Hot particles bombarded the west coast of U.S. and Canada. Contaminated the farms and some food sources. Well, the fallout contaminated all the farms, all the food sources worldwide in 19.5 days, basically. And it never stopped. It was invisible. Oh, that was Fairwind's Maggie Gunnarsson, who was a pro-nuclear lobbyist for 2 decades. Contaminated farms and food sources, radioactive debris on twice the size of Texas is crossing the Pacific. Yeah, because the tsunami swept 2,000 square miles of the coastline, 480 kilometers of the coastline, up to 10 kilometers inland. It sucked it out into the ocean. So you had this 2,000 square mile chunk of madness with sumo wrestlers dead on the roofs of the homes that were floating away, allegedly. So they're in the middle of the Pacific. So the plume is coming from China. It's going to be covering the debris constantly. That distributed it all over the ocean as it sank, right? But it had fuel pellets and everything all over the whole bloody thing. Fuel particulates, I should say. Particles. We're talking about a surreal amount. Because think about when the tsunami happened, right? And it sucked it all out to sea. And that's very slow moving, but it's spread out because you're talking about 480 miles, of the coastline that were inundated with the tsunami, aka the wood chipper. That was nasty, man. Those things, nothing can stand up against it. So anyway, the tsunami got everything out in the Pacific. You got fallout from 8 fuel pools and 4 reactor cores, 3 that were running, 1 that was half full. And the evidence is the destruction, see? Over half the fuel had melted out of reactor 2 and 3. Says TEPCO's assuming the worst case scenario. Well, I think that's pretty reasonable, you ask me. But they retracted that statement shortly after, by the way. The average person in Seattle was bringing 10 hot particles a day. Again, Scumderson, Ernie the Scumbag Gunderson, traitor. What a traitor's thing he done to us. Average person in Seattle breathed in 10 hot particles. Well, what about the birds and the bees and the insects and the trees and the flowers and the children? And they done that because, reactor 3 and 4 fuel pools were lost and they refused to acknowledge it. They officially refused to acknowledge that's the official pictures. Top cancer doctor, nuclear radiation, the most carcinogenic thing that exists. And I've heard it say, and I heard it argued successfully, that the fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Lethal threat from the Fukushima highly radioactive water flowing into the Pacific 2013. No, Dana, it's all in the tanks, Dana. Mom, Dana's talking about the tanks again. Nuclear scientists are panicking worldwide. So the stump of reactor 4. Look at the damage to that sucker. I put a little video together where I crawl in this hole here, and then I'm screaming in the background as I melt. It's not that hard to watch. It only takes about 30 seconds to kill me. Unprecedented spike, 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs detected in the California air. California right now is getting pounded by snowstorms. Holy shit. That's madness. California got some weird attributes, right? So the pollution from Asia, from factories and that, automotive, these are massive particles compared to radioactive fallout. Add to California's pollution indexes. And the way the wind works, a lot of it that do show up in California just lingers for months. So, like, if you're sending pollution over from across the Pacific, Trans-Pacific corridors, that's a weapon, because you can poison people in increments over time. You know it's going to carry it across in 5 or 6 days, right? So California is a very bad spot for a nuclear accident on the opposite side of the Pacific because of the way the wind carries it across. And it's the breadbasket for North America for a lot of product on top of that. So now they're talking about the snowpack. Oh, we're going to have great snowpack in the mountain this year, Timmy, on the TV and radio, right? But what they should be saying is, hey, we're going to have a great snowpack this year in the mountains, Timmy, because we ain't got no ice pack up there after Fukushima. That all melted in the following years. We recorded it all the way to Alaska. The Cascades and everything were stripped of millennium ice. That's an incredible story that was denied, but we took the pictures of the whole coastline 6 years in a row. Can't deny it. U.S. West Coast bore a significant brunt of hot particles from Fukushima. U.S. West Coast. U.S. West Coast. Well, you mean planet Earth, right? This model is 21 days. This is plutonium-239 dispersal over North America. You know why that happened? Because reactor 3 and reactor 4 are gone, and the fuel pools are gone, and they faked getting the fuel out of these pools. So we're trying to teach people that this was a cover story. This is a catastrophic event, not just for humanity, but all species. Very high concentrations of hot particles, including plutonium and americium. Well, here's your plutonium. Here's your plutonium. I think this is the americium. There's neptunium. They both decayed to plutonium-239, by the way. We're getting there. Hang on. So we have independent documentation of that separately, right? Fukushima Reactor 3 to your left and Reactor 4 to your right. Okay, so Reactor 4, Reactor 3. Now, this picture you're looking at is a very, very, very special picture. It's very high quality. And after this picture, I got my hands on that and started zooming in. You can no longer download pictures from Japan's 5 major newspapers anymore online. They put a kibosh to that, but too late. This was really high. So Reactor 3 is up there. Let me show you before we do the zooming. Zoom, 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 zoom. And look at the debris on the roof. And so look at a stump, look at a hole in the stump of reactor 3, and they put a plate over a hole like that on the other side. This must have been too hot. They couldn't put a plate over it. They built this off-site. It's 170 feet tall. It's on the stump, and it's designed to manipulate you, as you'll see. This is the remains of reactor 4. And I'll do zoom-ins on the debris behind it. But think about the debris out here. This is lethal doses. And that was the cover story. They built that off-site, brought it in with cranes, and laid it there. And so when you see stuff like this is just covering a hole. That's what these contraptions they got put there. This is all done by cranes. But when you zoom in, you start to realize that reactor 3 is just the wreckage, same as reactor 4. This is the stump of reactor 4. They bought in the frame, they dropped these panels in there with cranes. There's no human intervention. Excuse me. And look at all this debris, yet allegedly inside is perfect shape. I'm supposed to have a couple of those pictures there. Just bear with me, because we're jumping around the pain. Sometimes my system doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Okay. So Reactor 4 is the cover story. Ernie Gunnison done a good job of pretending that everything was okay. Oh, I had knocked the plug out of my light. Now that's why it didn't want to work. Alrighty, all back to normal on that. Bear with me. Alrighty, here we go. So they're pretending it looks like that inside of that. So they put a cover on it. You can see the cover in this picture better, right? But it actually looks like this. So they put a cover on this. But when you zoom in, you can see that it's just laid there with the cranes. They didn't physically work there, or they would have cleaned up all that debris. And the only reason we have this documentation is because this single picture that was very high quality that a Japanese media put out there. And I was able to zoom in. I was like, oh my God, wow, we got it. And what I mean by that is it's almost impossible to get high quality documentation. Right? Everybody's using the press release pictures. So we got the original 1900 pictures, and we've done 6 videos to explain those pictures to people and the time frame that they were allegedly taken in. And turns out to be a complete lie about when they took the pictures. And we explained that in the presentations, right? So look on the roof right here. Look at the debris over there. Look at the stump. You got to realize, right, that that's what it's covering is this. It doesn't physically touch the building below it on top of that. Right, so it's not physically going to touch the building. It's designed just to manipulate you, put this cover over it, and then pretend on the inside, we'll get to it coming up. Unless I can find it. Over on this side, make it quicker for you. Why should my world be easy? I wonder, because it's not. Okay, let's keep it rolling. So it's hard to do context when you see that building looking like that. So I'll just give you a couple of pictures of what they've done to Reactor 1 that will bring it into more context how big them structures are. So it's hard to appreciate it. This picture kind of does it a bit better, because you can see a guy walking right here. So you can see how big the structure is. Now, go all the way up with this structure. You can imagine now how big the buildings actually are. This is where they put his Kevlar sarcophagus around it for the first 5 years. But it was radiating so much radiation, they had to get rid of the covering after 5 years. And now it no longer has a covering. And they're all laid with panels, right? Everything is one big panel. There's nobody physically going to survive in that environment. And so you can't, even if you did build a structure above it, you can't hang out or go to it because you have raging mixed oxide fuel meltdown. You're surrounded by meltdowns. You're in hell land, right? And so these contraptions are meant to block up a hole in this massive building. Remember the actual size of these buildings. So they built the contraption you can see up there in the corner. I can zoom in. And see that hole there is supposed to be representing the fuel pool. They're allegedly now, they're going to reach down, the fuel pool is intact. That's what this contraption they're building with the cranes is all about. But look underneath it. Because this, right, they had this hole covered in the final version of it, right? Now this is done with cranes. They might have sacrificed a few dozen homeless people on it. But that's what it looked like after the original detonation and meltdown, right? Reactor 3 debris flew into the control room. Workers, saints in hell, thought he could have died. This was a mixed oxide fuel meltdown. This is significantly scarier than a typical frightening reactor melting down. Startling secret. Fukushima evidence revealed fear that Reactor 3 would break apart after signs reactor number 2 vessel was destroyed. 90% of the workers fled in mass panic. That's the stump of Reactor 3. Visible hot mass floated in the air and fell for hours after Reactor 3. Diluted version may have reached Tokyo. Well, of course diluted, but it reached Tokyo. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. 29,000 becquerels per square meter in just a single rainfall. That's never going away. These are pictures of Reactor 3 and stories of Reactor 3 that I'm showing you after we stop looking at Reactor 3 Fable. What's underneath it is this. So you can put a cover over, but you can't change that. You can't pretend the pools and the reactor cores are in the building when they're not. Because that's what that contraption they're using is all about, right? Highly significant quantities of fission products are flushed into the environment by water used on the molten fuel. So the fuels typically need 4,500 tons, 1 million gallons per minute, washing over. So a reactor core is splitting atoms. It's a perpetual disease factory. It's hemorrhaging atoms into the environment. And the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods is curium isotopes. And curium decays to plutonium eventually. It could be a short few days or a year or two, but it'll decay to plutonium. Except for 244, I think, has a 18-year half-life or something. Then it decays to plutonium 230, 244. This is a very energetic, long-lived type of isotope. Most isotopes that are very energetic are low-life. Low half-lives, but not close to all of them. So the plutonium isotopes, uranium isotopes, the iodine-129 isotope, for instance, with a 15 million year half-life, and these are a serious problem for all species for long past the human experience. So all the species have to be put into the equation. The species are way more vulnerable than we are on top of that. And if they go, we go. And guess where they're gone? Radioactivity recirculates for generations in the food chain. Well, what can survive it? Like I said, the West Coast, the East Coast, you don't have spiders in your trees and bushes anymore. They're on your buildings and trucks and shovels and garbage cans. And if you look at the webs are going to be deformed. And there's no life, no diversity in the webs. If that doesn't frighten the shit out of you, you're pretty cold, man. You're cold. TEPCO made Fukushima plant into a machine for generating radioactive disease initiator water machine. Runoff from the atomic plague is now in the groundwater, and air cooling should be used. Well, you can't cool it by air. If you don't keep the water on, if you don't keep it physically underwater, it's China syndrome. And that's what happened to it, because you couldn't get near it. You didn't have any fresh water. You had a tsunami rip out 480 miles of the coastline, 670 kilometers or something. Gone. And at the same time, it's being sprinkled constantly with huge numbers of fallout. And then that's distributed. Say it all sank in the ocean. It would all sink everywhere, all over the ocean. You would have these physical properties on the ocean floor that are splitting the atoms. The simplest, quickest way to kill an ocean is you doing something like that. It's the most effective thing you could do. You not only got radioactive plumes covering the planet, you've got physical particles being lugged out to different places all over the Pacific Ocean and deposited where they're splitting atoms perpetually. Way to go, scumbag nuclear. Scumbag nuclear physicist suspects the number 3 MOX spent fuel have spread out around the air. And Jesus, why would you think that for? I say that's a pretty strong possibility, seeing as the reactor cores and the fuel pools are at the top of the building. But that's not official. Officially, they got them all out, and everything is great. Don't listen to Dana. Don't look at the evidence. Whatever you do, don't look at the evidence. Don't look at it. Did the Degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency and the scumbag nuclear industry and the sacks of shit in Japan fake the Fukushima Reactor 3 and 4 fuel pool recovery? Yes. 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 We got 100%. Where's the little shih tzu tonight? You usually hear it giving us a thumbs down. That always disappears a few hours later anyway. It happens every night, right? They'll show up, give you a thumbs down, and they'll leave again. And that the algorithm will say, well, that person didn't watch the video, and so they take that thumbs down away, right? Japanese media block out the words MOX, plutonium, and meltdown. Gee, I wonder why they said that. Most of the fallout from the plutonium containing MOX fuel will drop on the U.S. unless strong winds take it out elsewhere. They did, worldwide. This model was just part of the model. Let me get that model up for you. That's the wrong screenshot for some reason. So that's the model. After 16 days, it fell everywhere, right? Mixed oxide fuel. The worst thing can happen to a planet is one of those badasses goes down. That's 2 of them. One went down in Sellafield in 57. At the Sellafield, disgusting what they done. It's still hemorrhaging 8 million liters a day into the Atlantic Ocean on top of that, from the mixed oxide reactor that melted down. Government simulation shows radioactive plume of Krypton-85 over Tokyo. Well, that covered the northern hemisphere, right? Gee, everything looks pretty good to me from there, Dana. That's the top of Reactor 4. And up there is the mangled wreckage of Reactor 3. Yeah, because that explosion tells the tale. Gleeful vultures, they were talking about me in that one. England's Sellafield plutonium MOX facility to close because of Fukushima. 50% of the fuel was for TEPCO. Disgusting British, man. The nuclear industry in Britain is just... It doesn't shock me, but it never stops horrifying me how evil the nuclear industry in Britain actually is. I've been studying them for as long as I can remember, and I haven't found a single one there that I would let... If they stopped the car and told me to go across the road, there's no way I'd cross the road with them in a car in front of me. So the reactor core and the fuel pool are both underwater in the pools. Long gone. It doesn't exist anymore. MOX fuel probably caused nuclear explosion number 3 spent fuel pool. Scumbag Chris Busby. Degenerate Chris Busby. They got put on a pedestal, right? There was Helen Caldicott, Christopher Busby, Arnie Gunnarsson, Kevin Camps from Beyond Nuclear, same as Helen Caldicott. And they're degenerate scum that refuses to acknowledge the fuel pools are gone. Come back here, Light. I need you, baby. Don't die on me now. There we go. I got these little small lights that I really love the color from them. They're color corrected just for video and photography. The right spectrum, right? And I got 10 different settings on them. I have 6 of them. And they're one of my favorite lights. They're mobile too, right? They're rechargeables. They're super nice, and they're indestructible. You can bounce them off walls all you want. You can't destroy them. They're real lights, right? And so they were good on the ocean. What do you do with the spent MOX fuel? Well, you built it in an earthquake zone, and where do you have massive tsunamis every so often, according to the Japanese, anyway. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm being realistic, right? The Non-Regulatory Commission's possible worst-case scenario was examine MOX at the number 3. They examined, the NRC examined the MOX fuel at number 3. So that's why we're going to poll tonight. Did the disgusting nuclear industry, the International Scumbag Energy Agency, and shit for brains Japan fake the Fukushima Reactor 3 and 4 fuel pool recovery? Yep. Because the fuel pools are at the very top of the building. And there is no top. Or building. It's just a stump lift when they squeegeed off what was left. Local officials suggested more footage of Reactor 3 explosion after bringing up the MOX. The videos of the explosion are not allowed to be seen. And the one that we see, the explosion that we see, was a security camera about 27 miles away where they zoomed in. So it's not very clear, right? So imagine something within a couple of miles of it where you can physically see the fuel assemblies and the reactor core falling out of the sky for that bad boy. Because they're gone. Now, officially, they're not. Officially, everything is intact, and Dana's fear-mongering. But everything I'm showing you is the official sanctioned depictions and stuff like this and actual physical stories. Experts on Japan's MOX fuel, I think the ship is sinking beneath them. There really is a credibility. Well, it's worse than a credibility. It's an extinction event. And the inventory of those destroyed buildings, Reactor 3 and 4, are not in. So in 2000, again, Mari Yamaguchi, she seems to be the one that always breaks the story. I put on her Twitter account, scumbag murderer. She blocked me, obviously, right? Not be seen because of steam and fog. The area of the core could not be seen. They're talking about Reactor 3. So this is... we covered this when the story came out. I'm looking for the date. Just give me a second here. Is that 2015 or 2017? Okay, 2017. January 2017. We covered this for 6 days straight. And so there was all this hoop, ha, ha. And then he said they removed, like, allegedly, it was 2 assemblies or something. And then they said, well, you know, it's Chinese New Year or whatever the hell it was. We got to take a break for a while. Utilities delay removal of spent fuel from the Fukushima reactor. And so they're claiming the fuel pool had 566 fuel assemblies from Fukushima's plant's Unit 3 storage pool. And I do the math coming up, I think, in a little bit. It's around 45,000 fuel rods, which is a fraction of the actual fuel rods that would have been in the pools. Because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan. They were keeping all of it, same as every other plant worldwide, in the fuel pools. And in that design, they're at the top of the building. Utility delays removal of spent fuel from Fukushima Reactor 3. Yeah, 45,200. And that's 45,000. And that's 120,000 pounds? I can't remember because that's a long time ago, 2017. Yeah, 120,000 pounds is all they got in the fuel pools. They won't lie to you at all. And they're claiming there's only 800 tons in all the other fuel pools, Reactor 1 and 2. This is ludicrous to suggest that there's only that fraction of amount of fuel stored in the fuel pools. They're 40-year-old reactors. The common spent fuel pool can only hold around 10 million to 12 million pounds when it's stuffed. And they're stuffed, same as the reactor cores. And they're usually stuffed 5 times their supposedly capacity. Everything is still splitting the atoms, and they boil off. The more you put in, the more water boils off each day, right? But think of about 120,000 liters per fuel pool, each liter with trillions and trillions of anthropogenic man-made atoms. When it's liberated to the environment, now it's radioactive fallout. This is why almost all nuclear power plants worldwide are surrounded by farms. Right up to the sides of the reactors, baby. They hate you and the species more than you can ever imagine. Japan delays plan to remove the nuclear fuel at Fukushima. That's the 27th of January, I think. So, I'm not going to go through everything, obviously. We got an absurd amount that we covered back in 2015 when they were talking about it, 2017 when they claimed to do it. And then they didn't open their pie holes till 2020. And so then they said it's all out, but they didn't show any footage. Well, kind of, right? I'll show you that. Plans to remove the nuclear fuel at Fukushima delayed again. Well, there is no fuel in the fuel pool, and I just spent an hour probably showing you the documentation, the evidence. It's unassailable documentation. Right there quoting Mari Yamaguchi. And you see, if you go back through history, Mari Yamaguchi broke all the cover propaganda stories. And then it spread out like a so-called spider web from there, because it's the only spider webs we got left on the planet now is the industry. Utility delays removal of spent fuel from the reactors. Well, we beat the shit out of them for 6 days. Being me, I came out for 6 days and pounded them with documentation when they done this. Every day. Well, I was going 7 days a week back then. I was a fucking animal back then. I'm older now and busted up and barely hanging on. Utilities delay removal of spent fuel from the Fukushima reactor. Actually, I'm doing pretty good. I must admit, I'm doing really good. I still gotta recover, but I'm doing pretty darn good. Another couple of months. Next year, baby. Next year is a bad year for this industry. Utilities delay removal of the spent fuel from the Fukushima reactor. We covered it all anyway. Utility delays the spent fuel. New image shows all the melted fuel is gone from the reactors. Well, I just showed you an absurd, overwhelming amount of documentation that quantifies those types of assertions, right? Document shows nuclear fuel burned to the bottom of the containment vessels under the reactors. Well, no. Like 1 and 2 reactor, and you can't see inside of it or go inside of it. It's lethal doses. There's no robots that work inside of it. And they're talking about reactor 3 and 4. That's 2015. And I showed you for almost an hour 3 and 4 doesn't exist. It's overwhelming amount of documentation. Molten core is suspected to have penetrated the Fukushima containment vessels. We couldn't be in Tokyo if the melted fuel went through the containment vessels. Think about that statement. Such terrible people, eh? I was supposed to have that saved. Bear with me. So they couldn't be in Tokyo if that happened. Guess what? It happened. Where was I? Right around here somewhere. Yeah, Prime Minister on 3/11, March 11, which is the 12th anniversary in 3 days. We couldn't be in Tokyo if the melted fuel went through the containment vessel. We couldn't be in Tokyo, where there's 36 million people, metropolitan Tokyo, if the containment vessel in either, certainly both of those reactors, so both of those reactors, it's gone. It wasn't fractured, it was turned into shards. It's like you had a wine glass, a really, really delicate wine glass, and you dropped it from 20 feet up onto rocks, onto boulders that were all the size of Shinzo Abe's head. Well, at least we got some good news this year in the last 12 months. People might not understand that one. It's an inside joke. I know personally I'm happy about it. I don't know about anybody else. But after what he'd done to planet Earth, I couldn't be happier. I still laugh every time I see it. CBS promotes Fukushima area seafood. Better if it's allowed to contain more radioactive waste. CBS, you're loving CBS. It's better if it's allowed to contain more radioactive waste in the seafood. Radioactive waste seafood. The best way for the non-regulatory committee to calm Americans' nuclear anxieties is to be interviewed by 60 Minutes. So 60 Minutes wanted to do an interview with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to manipulate the population. That's what they spend most of their time doing, is manipulating the population. You don't really think you were getting Fox for free on cable because it was good natured, do you? Tokyo press conference. Cancer is clearly increasing in the Fukushima children. Cancer in the Fukushima children. I forget, what's the numbers again? 865,000 in the first year, extra cancers. Cancer is just one of 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies, injuries that you got to worry about. There's 1,800 autoimmune illnesses that will manifest before cancer. Not everybody got health care. Japan's press conference calls for jailing of TEPCO's officials. Again, they should bring back burning them at the stake. Not because of how much fun it's going to be, but because it's the right thing to do. I'm not saying that I'm going to enjoy watching it for the rest of my life. That's personal. Says international media damaged Japan's brand. The media done it, the bastards. It didn't melt down. Dana's lying. There's no radioactive fallout. Benjamin Fulford says there's no radioactive fallout. You know, he's wrong. And we got so much evidence. The evidence of the radioactive fallout it's incontestable. It's unassailable. Blast at the Fukushima Reactor 3 was like exploding vortex ring. The ejection of nuclear fuel implies there was a criticality excursion, a flash up, a chain reaction just flashed up from the neutron bombardment. Black smoke may have been a burning MOX in uranium. Jeez, I don't know. Did it burn? Yeah, maybe. Who knows? No, it burned. It's all gone, stupid. Are you calling me stupid? No, I'm calling me. Blast at the Fukushima Reactor 3 was like an exploding vortex. Ejection of the nuclear fuel. That seems about right to me. I don't know how you're supposed to argue with that. Keep it rolling. Leader of the Fukushima plant was staggering, mumbling, and it's all over. Appears to collapse. Yeah, well, the radioactive fallout is still falling out. It will for many, many decades yet. It's liberated every time there's a forest fire. Deliberate cover-up of the public's exposure to the radioactive fallout and health problems they are suffering from is now Japan's biggest problem, the continual, purposeful concealment of facts. And that the media will not properly report what's going on. Nuclear chemist expert, steam at Fukushima reactor could be for corium burning through the containment into the groundwater. From the corium. Corium is the biggest byproduct of radiative fuel. Not iodine, not cesium. I actually hate the word cesium, and I really hate the word cesium with an A. You have no idea how much I hate the word cesium. Because every time I hear it, all I can think of is scum in Britain. I visually see them too, right? That's what bothers me the most. Wouldn't be so bad if I didn't have to have those pictures imprinted. Nuclear chemist experts, steam at Fukushima reactor could be from the corium burning through the containment into the groundwater. I think that's a pretty fair statement, personally. Harvard website, Harvard University. Media blindly reports TEPCO's false radiation levels. The press won't report the truth. It's still scary in Tokyo. People are moving away because of hot spots. Oh, like Tokyo was holy shit land. Just one rainfall was 29 million becquerels a square meter. These are just absurd numbers in radioactive fallout territory. Environment abruptly changed for half of Japan. Well, yeah, you exterminated everything. There was no birds, no insects. You had migratory animals that would come through, like the boars and the macaques, bears. People move away due to hotspots, but all the little species were wiped out right away. Environment abruptly changed, Dana. Nuclear chemist expert. Steam at Fukushima reactor could be for corium burning through the containment. Well, this footage is extraordinary footage. This is the right conditions. So the emissions from the China syndrome that are coming out of the ground in 6 places at 10 sieverts an hour. I'm going to double. This is 40 times normal speed. I'm going to double it to 80 times normal speed. And now I'm going to bump it. I'll move it back. Now this, you need the right conditions for the steam to show up, right? But if you don't run immediately when that happens, you're going to die. You have no way of surviving that. That is a catastrophic event. And that's why no nuclear scientists have ever visited Fukushima. And it's hard to appreciate how big these sites actually are. That's 80 times normal speed. That is a catastrophic event. Still going strong. And so that's everything gets coated with a lethal dose on top of that. That's why no nuclear scientist goes to Fukushima, or academics, or nuclear corporations, or politicians. Press conference actors or anything like that. Press conference, Japanese government kills our children. I'm very worried and afraid. People who work for TEPCO are not human. They have neither tears nor blood. Such sad stuff. So this was a story that came out in 2019 or 2020. They might have the date here. This is Rupert Winfield Hayes pretending he's going into the reactor that I superimposed him over.
This is very strange to be standing inside here, because this huge structure I'm standing inside is right on top of reactor building number 3. And down underneath me here is the melted reactor core inside this building. Over the top here they have built a shield to lower the radiation levels so that we can come up here, so that workers can come up here to construct this. But radiation levels are still very high here, and because of that we can only spend a few minutes here. Now if you come over here, there's my alarm going off. This is the spent fuel pool. Down inside here are more than 560 spent fuel assemblies.
Yeah, I don't see Dana. They're getting so many snowstorms down there. So I didn't see Dana in the comments section. I guess he's your moderator usually. And super nice people. But anyway, they got like 48 feet of snow down where he's to over the last while. And we're going to get snow this week. And it's irrelevant when you think about how bad California just got pounded for weeks. Like, we're talking 48 feet of snow. Like, it's absurd. You can't dig yourself out of it, right? It's too much snow. And so how many people think that Rupert Winfield Hayes from the BBC is looking in the fuel pool where I superimposed him, right? None, right? Because it doesn't exist. More theories on the Fukushima nuclear reactor explosion. Look for a date on that. 2021, January 27th. I'll show you screen captures of their explosion, and they're trying to analyze the explosion and pretend that it didn't destroy the building like it actually did, right? The idea was to gut it, build a structure over it that doesn't physically touch it because it looks like that underneath it, and that these people would come out and say it wasn't a criticality, right? Despite the fact that's actually what it was. So that's reactor 3 detonating. That's a rare, higher quality footage, by the way. And so this building is 190 feet tall. And so you can imagine how big the explosion was. That's the reactor fuel pool right here, pieces of it. There's another couple pieces right there, right here. You're going to see a bunch of big chunks fall down. If I get my big head out of the way there and let things play out. They felt this explosion 25 miles away. Nuclear official confirms explosion at number 3. Well, what do you mean confirms explosion? You don't need to confirm anything. The pictures hopefully tells that story to even a layperson. Oh, went past it again. Japan crews facing a 100-year battle at Fukushima because they lost the fuel pools and the reactor cores. Don't drink the rainwater. Rainwater is the state of Virginia. And you can see with the fallout, that's the reactor cores falling down, right? Japanese officials say they delayed in raising Fukushima to level 7 because we could have triggered a panicked reaction. But what's the point of having levels if you're not going to warn people? Right? So they should be arrested and jailed for the rest of their natural lives. I think they should be get the death penalty because they murdered our planet. And they covered it up. Independent French Radiation Commission warns Europe the health risk from Fukushima fallout is no longer harmless, and says the U.S. West Coast is 8 to 10 times more. But we've seen 220 million atoms of just the iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life out of Ottawa, Canada study. Cesium and iodine, which are the cover stories, both at least 600% above the internet. Well, there is no Environmental Protection Agency. There's the Pro-Nuclear Agency. Maximum contamination levels in Hawaii milk, which meant Hawaii should have been evacuated permanently. So it's no longer safe to be there, see? So when you look at the excursion, the detonation, Japan's nuclear agency, because they called it an excursion, like it's gone on a little expedition or something. It'll be right back in your dreams. Japan's nuclear agency finally admitted fuel had melted in reactor 1, 2, and 3. Well, first off, when you look at reactor 3, there was no meltdown. There was a detonation and ejection of the solid fuel, the fuel pools and the reactor cores. It was solid. It was projectiles. It wasn't a fire. This was a projectile, right? This was instantaneous. This was the proverbial blink of an eye. More serious than a meltdown, the Japan government now raised the possibility that fuel had a melt through at all 3 reactors because they're not including reactor 4. So that's not a melt through. You know, just saying. I'm trying to be a Mr. Know-it-all or anything, but that's not a melt through. That's a pop out. That's projectiles, right? I do believe that's the video. I'll get my head out of the way because it's in the way. So there's a zoom. I got a zoom of this too. I'll play right away. So this is a long shot, 27 miles away, zoomed in with a security cameras. So it's not really clear, right? And it's old technology. But that's an incredible, perfect plume. That's a high amplitude ejection. That's the real deal. Let's do that close-up one more time. So this was a detonation. Look, you can see the flame, right? You can see the flame, and then you see the excursion. That's a 190-foot building. That's 4 decades of reactor cores and 2 different fuel pools, and a full reactor full of mixed oxide fuel ejected into the environment. And you can see the physical parts of the building at the very top of it, and they're going to follow a predictable path, right? Because that's how gravity works. And so when you see the predictable path, this cracks me up. They're claiming this is reactor 3. And look how much space they put to the top of the building. They got 1/3 of the building they're claiming is an empty shell. It doesn't actually work like that. But that's how they're... Now, one of them is the elevator shaft where they would lower fuel down. There would be a 1-ton or a 18 special transport truck. I can't remember how many wheels. It got like 90 wheels or something. Will come in and lay these casks, which are up to 70 tons each, right down through the what they call the elevator. But there's 2 fuel pools. So this would be the elevator right here. The other 2 are fuel pools. So they're claiming the cap for the reactor is right there. They'll show pictures in a second. Modified, fake. So this is totally fake, right? I'm going to go back. So you can see both of the fuel pools are empty, and this is the elevator shaft. And then the round circle that they got there is their imaginary cap to the reactor core, which has to be underwater, inside of it. And they're claiming underneath the cap of it, it's a lethal dose, so they can't lift it. But what they're trying to claim is that the fuel has dripped down, and they're showing the pools intact. Look at this. The containment vessel, and then the torus, which is where they burp radiation into the environment, what they call burping. And the cap at the very top is what they're saying is so radioactive they can't lift it to check underneath it. And so they're claiming this is the official picture inside the mangled reactor that I showed you. Here, let me show you another picture to give you context. To your left. So there's only a stump. The top of that part of the building that they're talking about doesn't actually exist, which is why I got a poll tonight. Did the International Atomic Energy Agency, the nuclear industry, and the disgusting Japanese fake the Fukushima Reactor 3 fuel pool? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Thank you very much. May I have another? Yes, you may. So then they couldn't do it because it was several sieverts, they said, underneath the lid, which would have showed the fake reactor would have been right below it, right? But that lid is at the top of the building. That's above the fuel pool, or that's in the fuel pool itself. They have to keep it underwater, otherwise the zirconium cladding burns, right? The tanks were built to manipulate you and deceive you and disarm you, and to so they wouldn't get blamed for killing the ocean and the planet in the future. That's the genius cover story, and they're sticking to it. But I showed you the documentation that unequivocally shows that this is their story is a complete fable. And if you don't learn the difference and the things you can and can't do, you're in for a miserable existence. You already are, but you got to avoid all Japanese food, including the stuff that's imported into friendly countries, relabeled and shipped to yours. You got to get that through your heads. You got to learn not to buy that stuff, because you're poisoning everybody, and anybody with a compromised immune system is gonna drop fairly quickly. So when you zoom in, there is nothing in the building. This structure, which is 170 feet high, was designed to manipulate you. And this is the big secret to cracking control of the planet, because they got control of the planet to make this cover story work. Reactor blew up, not the reactor building. And we got so much documentation, and then when you bring it together into a presentation like this, how do you argue the facts? They're going to attack me, they're going to smear me, they're going to make up shit about me. But I don't need to go away, because I'm telling the truth. And that's why I provide my name, my phone numbers all the time. That's why I work like a dog all the time. So that you'll wake up and save the planet, because I can't do it. But you could. All you gotta do is get busy. Busy, get really busy. Senior advisor who resigned said Japan's government set the public safety radiation limits 20 times too high. Well, they're only checking, and they're not actually doing it, but they claim to be checking for cesium. They're not checking for anything else. Period. Nothing. Just cesium. And so they're not checking for the cesium. We've been covering this forever, and they're not checking. Checking. Comparisons with X-rays and CAT scans are meaningless. Inhaling the particles increases the exposure by a factor of 1 trillion, because it's already 1 billion times more toxic, 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So when you got it in your body, it's pulsing energy at the speed of light in every direction. It's wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, and everything else, and your organs. For adults, 50 becquerels a kilogram means permanent lesions on your organs. It's all downhill for there. Fukushima, because your immune system is compromised, trying to deal with that for the rest of your life. Fukushima nuclear plume covered most of North America, now over the Atlantic and Canada and the Caribbean. I showed you the models, of course. The models clearly show you don't want to eat food from Japan. I'll get it right in a second. Oh, or anywhere else. You definitely don't want to eat anything from Japan. That's a good spot to start, not eating food. And Japan gives you a lot of reasons not to eat their food. On top of that, they're growing food in a no-go zone right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. Thousands and thousands of 1-ton bags of radiation. Plutonium levels suggest fuel rods were shattered during the hydrogen explosion. Jeez. I don't know. I can't tell the difference. Everything looks perfectly normal to me. I don't know what all the whoop is about. Any idea how many times I heard that? And how many times I will hear it in the future? There is spent fuel and pellets and whatever, it can't be good, all over the place around the plant. The doses are going to be incredible. You think? Really? These are uninhabitable doses you're talking about. You can't go in there. You can't survive. You drop dead no matter where you go. So the original sacrifice, who knows how many? Well, Chernobyl, they had 1 million conscripts. They were out with buses. They done this with the United Kingdom too, by the way. They went out with buses and jacked people from the streets and the theaters. Hey, yo, get on the bus. What's a nuclear? Don't know. Don't worry about it. You only got to go in there for 25 seconds. You can go home. Unburned MOX fuel containing plutonium was in a mushroom-like cloud. Unburned... No, this was the fuel rods were projectiles. This was rock and roll, baby, at the drop of a hat. This was over with. Like the whole explosion, how long did that take? 2 minutes for everything to fall back down that was really heavy? This, you're talking about actual reactor cores thrown a mile out of the building. As pyroplastic is going to burn as it's flying through the air. And there's going to be just 60 million fuel rods in every direction. Very definition of, oh shit. Nuclear fuel rods in number 4 spent fuel pool are confirmed to be damaged. Confirmed to be damaged. Number 4, which is this building here. Damaged. You're damaged. Whoever wrote that. It's awful. Just awful. Number 3, reactor just blew. Probably a steam explosion. Not hydrogen. Well, the hydrogen is created by the meltdown itself. It doesn't matter what, like, again, right, they use uranium-235, for instance, in fracking. So they'll take a couple of grams, put it into explosives for fracking, and it'll give it 8 times more power. So when you have a meltdown, you're atomizing and aerosoling the fuel. And so think of gasoline. If you spray gasoline and light a match, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to detonate, right? Well, imagine throwing in, 1 million pounds or 10 million pounds of uranium plutonium, and you get that creature right there. Pyrophoric fire may have already occurred at Unit 4. The explosion possibly due to rods not being covered by water because the zirconium cladding flashes at 1800 degrees and then ignites uranium plutonium pellets and they burn at 9,000. The truck was put there to manipulate you. There is no pool. There is no reactor core. Enormous amount of plutonium in number 4 spent fuel pool in danger of catching fire. The pool is cracking and is leaking, said Arnie Scunnerson, Scummingson. Arnie's a lowlife, eh? What he done and we got him on tape over and over and over. It's shocking. The betrayal is. Well, it's symmetrical, isn't it? Right? Right through the institutions, the media, the universities, government agencies, and the popular controlled opposition like Gunnarsson, Caldecott, Busby, etc., etc., etc. Unit 4 had major impulse sound and damage. Fire seen hours later and again the next day. Well, let's have a look and see. That's reactor 4 right here. Yeah, I said that's pretty accurate. That looks pretty rough to me. Land under Fukushima reactor building is liquefaction. Areas near the sea could become like mud. Well, like the so-called idiot wall, aka ice wall, instead of a real wall, that's the first thing it's going to do. It's going to create a liquefaction where but there's no bottom in the wall, right? So the water is built on crushed rocks. So it does go down and hits the riverbed, the old but the covered up riverbed, which is covered in rocks. The rain, that way the water can still wash off the mountains. And then that's the old shit plant for all nuclear. It burns down to the underwater river, and then it's constantly covered in water. Land on, which is the worst thing can happen to a planet. Land under Fukushima reactor building at risk of turning into liquid. Well, you need 4,500 tons a minute normally on these reactors. Nuclear engineering, enormous amount of plutonium, number 4 spent fuel pool in danger of catching fire. And there's the official picture of reactor 4 fuel pool. Totally looks endangered. Let's not lie constantly, because that's what they do. Plutonium likely ejected from the fuel pools during the explosion up to 7 miles from the reactors. Well, there is no reactor. These are both the official picture. It can only be one of them. it can only be one picture. Did the degenerate scumbag International Atomic Energy Agency and the degenerate nuclear industry and the scumbag Japanese fake the Fukushima Reactor 3 and 4 fuel pool recovery? I don't know. Duh. Let's get back to business here. Does it look like the fuel pool to your top? You think it's invisible 100 foot above the carnage to your right? Is there anybody out there that thinks that at 100 feet above this, there's an invisible pool when you're inside of it? That's what it looks like? Anybody? Call in. I always wanted to meet a bona fide village idiot. Give me a call. 709-589-4406. I desperately want to meet you if you're gullible enough to know, to think that the pool to the left is 100 feet, 120, 30 feet above the carnage to the right. I never ever met the village idiot. Well, that guy from Japan who stalks me all the time, I think he qualifies as the village idiot, but one of the more of the building's explosions ejected radioactive material around the site at Fukushima. One or more of the building's explosions. One or more. You mean there was more than one? Oh, yeah. Contaminated water purposely being pumped into the basements of the Fukushima reactor turbine buildings. Well, you can't get near the hoses when you start doing that because that's lethal dosage. You can't walk over the hoses anymore. Government extremely radioactive tunnels at Fukushima must be drained. They allegedly were pumping it back on the melted reactors. Yeah, that's the nuclear industry. If it seems impossible, then you're not paying attention. The walls of Unit 4 spent fuel pool have collapsed. There is no water in there. So it doesn't look like the building to the left or the building to the right because they're the official pictures. Right? It can't be both, see? According to the media, the official picture is to the right. And according to the media, the official picture is to the left. If that's not confusing, what actually is, I wonder? Reactor number 4 spent fuel pool cracked from the earthquake. I don't know, let's have a look. Does it look like it's cracked to anybody? Oh, wait, no, it's gone. Renewed chain reaction feared at the spent fuel storage pool. Number 4 again. Arnie Gunnarsson says they went in and put supports under the fuel pool. Let me see if we can find out. That was a pretty entertaining clip. That always gets a chuckle out of me. Arnie wouldn't lie to us. Or would he? Is this one up here? There's a couple of them. Let's try 2 of them. Better check the volume though. You know how often I screwed that up over the years. Let's check this one. Now I put Arnie's video in the fuel pool. I kind of screwed it up, but it's close.
The Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or 2 of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This building is structurally weakened. Now Tokyo Electric's
Does that look like it's structurally weakened to anybody?
Acknowledge that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago. And put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
First off, there's 0 possibility of going in there. And second off, there's no fuel pool to put structure supports underneath it. I mean, that's the ultimate in what a fucking scumbag. Really?
Acknowledge that they went in May and June of last year.
Under the
This
fuel
is
pool that
more than a
doesn't
year ago,
exist.
and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool
I think he
from
said it was
breaking
like
through.
380 or something like that. Oh yeah, the fuel pool. It went in. Yeah. Number 4 deformed in front of our eyes, says Fukushima worker. Like special effects from a movie. No large explosion, yet the building was destroyed. No explosions, you say? Okay. Hey, whatever gets you to sleep at night, I suppose. Iodine 131, number 4, spent fuel pool suggests spent fuel has started its own chain reaction. Well, I mean, there is no fuel pools. Just because they're saying they're in a building that don't exist doesn't mean they're in a building that don't exist. That's the official pictures, all of it, and that's the official picture. 100% release of the Unit 4 spent fuel pool assumed in the NRC and analysts. 50% of Reactor 3. Well, let's have a look at Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, I suppose. Oh, they're gone. Right, so they talk in half-truths. 100% release Unit 4 spent fuel pool, but only half of building. There's less of Reactor 3 than there is of Reactor 4, by the way. Left. These are just stumps left. They're crazy. That's crazy talk. I'm just looking for a depiction of the fuel pool so I can mesmerize you with how friggin' confusing it actually is. Oh, that's why I can't find it. It's in the wrong. Try this again. Next time, I'll be on the ball. All right. Well, like that doesn't, because that's actually a better picture. Isn't she pretty? So imagine you owned a 190-foot building and you're on vacation and your employees sent you this picture and said, hey, we had a bit of a problem. Had a little explosion there. You want us to get the carpenter in and get an estimate? Yeah. Now we got Dana showed up. We figured she was digging snow, my friend. Because Lord knows you had enough snow there a couple of weeks ago. You don't need any more, and it hasn't stopped. I looked at it a couple of days ago or yesterday. It was 48 feet of snow. Man. We're going to get snow for the next 2 weeks starting tonight. But it's nothing compared to what Dana Nasana's got down there. He's going to need a new snowblower when this one's over a bit. Like, I don't know, folks, if you've seen pictures of the snow down there, it's like, holy shit, man. You're not getting out to the supermarket very easy, that's for sure. Fukushima. I guess we proved our point tonight, did we? Fuel rods were blown out of the spent fuel pool in reactor number 3. That's a pretty fair call. And they put this cover on it, but when you look at what the cover is covering up and what they're claiming it looks like on the inside, it's a little overwhelming, the lie is. There we go, we made it. Plutonium evaporated and spread around Fukushima. It was a nuclear explosion at Reactor 3. Yeah, fuel rods were knocked right out of the building. And we got a poll to reflect it. We're going to close the poll, I guess. That's the show. That's what we wrote. That's all we got. Like, I can go 5 shows in this week in a row and not get bored of this story because there's so much. I'm just showing you the unassailable amount of documentation because that's all that's necessary. And this is 100% documentation. And just so you can feel at ease when you recite that Reactor 4, Reactor 3 fuel pools were distributed worldwide, called radioactive fallout. Feeling pretty burnt out this week. This should be expected. I got a long way to go to recover. I wasn't planning on doing a show tomorrow. It was pretty rough to do this show tonight for me. I might feel better tomorrow. Who knows, right? But because it's the 12th anniversary, I really don't want to miss the show tomorrow night. But Saturday is the anniversary. So I'm thinking if I don't show up tomorrow night, then I'll be back on Saturday at an early show. But I don't think I will. I need time off, a couple of days here and there just to recover because I still got quite a ways to go, right? That was 3 weeks in the intensive care unit. You're not just coming back from it and recovering right away. Your body tells you that you ain't doing jack shit. You ain't doing jack shit, right? But I'm feeling so good since then, right? I just got to be careful that I don't accidentally think I can do things I can't, right? So another month or something, I'll feel more comfortable pushing myself. Now, I most likely will do a show tomorrow night, but there's a percentage, a small percentage, I might not make it back tomorrow night, just because I'm exhausted, and I feel it too, eh? But I do, again, I feel great. You know, I do these shows at night, totally different Dana from a month and a half ago, right? No problem, not losing my voice, everything doesn't hurt, and it's just, they fixed me up pretty good. I just got to not screw up the recovery. Don't miss taking the important stuff each day. It'll play itself out really fine. We're going to check the poll one more time. Did the Degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency, the disgusting nuclear industry, and the despicable Japanese industry fake the Fukushima Reactor 3 and 4 fuel pools recoveries? Well, there's only one answer, and that's the right answer, is yes. And the evidence is overwhelming. Can I play guitar for the anniversary? Yeah, I can so. That's a great idea, actually. Because I can plug right into my soundboard with the gear, right? Or I can plug the amp in too. I leave it on standby. But because we got the mic after all these years figured out, it would sound really good. That's a great idea. Some more Johnny Cash I've been working on lately. Johnny Cash songs. Good, easy, nice, fun picking, right? Johnny was really good at... Okay, hugs for everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Gotta remember to keep my glasses on. Can't see jack shit now since I had heart attacks. Yeah, Sunday we'll do... Yeah, thank you everybody. Hugs for everybody. Hope you all had a great night. Yeah, we'll break out the guitar on Sunday for sure. Just quick scan. Works for me. I'll read everything after. Thank you everybody. Awesome to see you folks here again tonight. I appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next show, hopefully tomorrow night. I probably will because we're leading up to the anniversary, right? And then on Sunday, I'll come back and do an anniversary show on Sunday. That way I get to see all the propaganda on Saturday, and we'll cover that on Sunday probably. Or Monday. Who depends? Who knows what it's going to bring us anyway? Do you know there's going to be propaganda? Yeah, I should try eye drops. That's a good point. Thank you, Peter. Or Pete. Tabitha, thank you again. Okay, that's it for me. Good night, folks. We'll see everybody on the next show. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow.
Nicht diese